Has World War III already started? Now, clearly, when I ask that question, I'm not talking about a kinetic war. The world isn't engulfed in flames right now, but various types of warfare exist that don't include non-lethal force. And if you look at it from that standpoint, that point of view, I believe the answer is yes. World War III has already begun. So let's explain. Now, there are various types of warfare that don't involve actually firing bullets at one another using violence and destruction to achieve your aims. There's psychological warfare, economic warfare, cyber warfare. There's all different types of warfare that don't necessarily use lethal force. And I think we're seeing that right now. While we can see that, we see evidence of that right now. So the question is, if World War III has already begun, who are the major players and what is the objective? So I think on one side we have the United States, Japan, Australia, Canada, the UK, Europe, the NATO allies, all of their associated allies. We'll call them the West for these purposes. So we have the West, the Western world on one side, and then on the other side we have Russia and China and the countries that are aligning around them. So if there is a war between these two groups taking place right now, what is the objective of that war? Now, I believe clearly the aim of this war is to create a bifurcated world, two separate worlds, a world with a much weakened West and a China and Russia axis that is much more powerful politically, economically, and militarily. And so we're going to get into what's happening, what's been happening, and where this is going, and why this is probably going to lead to that objective being achieved. So the first thing I want to pull up is I want to look at this article that I think highlights why this alliance is there, how we know this alliance is there. This is from December, right? And we went over this in the newsletter back in the early part of the year, but it says China hoards over half the world's grain, pushing up global prices. Less than 20% of the world's population has managed to stockpile more than half the globe's maize and other grains, leading to steep price increases across the planet and dropping more countries into famine. The hoarding is taking place in China. Now again, this is back from December 23rd. So this is a couple of months before Russia invaded Ukraine. So why was China doing this? Because they had to be doing this prior to December in order to accumulate that much grain. Why were they doing this? What were they preparing for? Because they hadn't done this in the past. This was a relatively new thing. So something made them fearful that the world's food supply would be under stress and that they would be unable to feed their population. And I believe clearly the answer is they knew that Russia was going to invade Ukraine, and they knew what that would do to the world's food supply. And they also knew that this war that was being undertaken would disrupt supply chains, and they wanted to make sure that they had adequate food to feed their population. Now, why am I so certain that they knew about this other than that they were stockpiling the grain? Well, think about it. Russia knew that they were going to face huge backlash from the West when they invaded Ukraine. They needed China to be in their corner, not necessarily as an active participant, but they couldn't have them as an opposition member, because if China had joined the West in condemning Russia for its actions, Russia really would have started to become isolated, and the sanctions that were imposed by the West would have had a much greater effect. So again, we see this happening. We see, when did all of this war begin? Did this begin with Ukraine? I think, yes, it most certainly began with the invasion of Ukraine, but it may have really started to begin back with psychological warfare when we think about the images that were coming out of China in January of 2020 and what the result of those images and that information ended up ultimately being, which was shutdowns in the global economy and a ripple effect through the global supply chain that served to ultimately weaken the West. The inflation that we see running rampant in Western economies right now is a direct result of those shutdowns that led to less productivity, that led to currency printing to hand out to citizens to help see them through that. And so you have more currency chasing fewer goods, and you have inflation. So that weakens the West economically. And ultimately, I think that that is where we're heading with this. So we had this flashpoint of Ukraine. And we have, when that happens, the West engages in economic warfare. And they impose sanctions on Russia to try to cripple Russia economically, squeeze them, make them stop, make them unable to continue this invasion of Ukraine. We also see them supplying arms and other things to Ukraine. But the sanctions were the backbone of that, cutting Russia out of SWIFT, really isolating them in the international community. And so we look at what was Russia's response to that. Well, we've seen what's happened in Europe with their energy supplies from Russia. So we've seen a form of siege warfare where Russia has slowly constricted the energy supply that they're providing to Europe to cripple their economy, slowly strangle them. So this is again, a form of siege warfare. It's a form of economic warfare and retaliation for those sanctions. But we've also seen other forms of warfare. We've seen cyber warfare. Let's turn to this article. It says, FBI warns of cyber attacks on U.S. food plants after a dozen hit by mysterious fires. The Federal Bureau of Investigation issued a statement last week warning of potential ransomware attacks against the agricultural industry as more than a dozen food processing plants across the United States suffered damage from mysterious fires, right? And this is from April 25th. So I believe Russia is using cyber attacks to hit at the United States, not just to hit the United States directly, but again, this plays into their objectives. If they can put stress on the food supply chain in the United States, which is one of the leading exporters, second leading exporter behind Russia of agricultural products, then what they can do is put strain on the global food supply chain and global food prices. And so if they can do that, then more and more countries become dependent on Russia, which was already the number one exporter, combined with now they have Ukraine's resources. So in the aftermath of all of this, of the war in Ukraine, the physical war and battle for territory in Ukraine, once those grains are able to be grown and supplied to the world again, don't think for a moment that Russia will not control exactly where that grain goes and that there won't be strings attached to it. So they're using food as a form of siege warfare to bring others into their axis, into their sphere of influence, so to speak. So we had the cyber attack the very same day. We read about what I believe is U.S. retaliation for those cyber attacks. It says Russia investigating fuel depot explosions and fire near Ukraine border amid pattern of incidents. And if you read through this article, you'll see that over a course of a week or two, there were several of these incidences of, again, mysterious fires, just like we heard about happening in the U.S., but these mysterious fires were happening at key Russian installations having to do with their military, with their fuel, different nodes within their network and within their supply chain that would help them wage the war in Ukraine. So I think we're seeing active and have been seeing active cyber warfare between the United States and Russia during this time. So then the question becomes, well, that's Russia's response to all of this, is to strangle Europe with energy, to wage cyber warfare, psychological warfare. But then we have to look at what's happening. What is China's tact? What is China doing? And we read this article which says COVID in China, million in lockdown in Wuhan after 4 cases, right? So this is just from last week. And it says almost 1 million people in the suburb of Wuhan, China's central city, where the virus I can't speak about on social media was first recorded, have been placed under lockdown. And then down here we read, China follows a zero COVID strategy, including mass testing, strict isolation rules, and local lockdowns. This has resulted in far fewer deaths than in many other countries. Well, based on the stats they're giving us, which I don't trust their data. And then it says, but the strategy is facing growing opposition as people and businesses continue to face the strain of restrictions. Now think about that. People and businesses are facing strain from these restrictions. Now, why would China do this? We know a lot about what they're supposedly trying to deal with here after 2.5 years. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of data. The rest of the world is not reacting the way China is right now. They haven't implemented this policy that China has implemented. China has to know that this isn't achieving the aim they claim they want it to achieve. So what's the purpose? Well, I believe the purpose is right here in this article. It's because those restrictions place strain on people and businesses. And who are those people and businesses? Well, China's top trading partners are Europe and the United States. And the supply chain weaknesses we have been seeing for a year and a half now have a lot of their origin in some of these shutdowns, right? And so shutting that stuff down, shutting down what's being done in those cities, ultimately weakens the West. It weakens that supply chain. Now, what advantage, other than the economic devastation, does that have for Russia, China, and its allies? Well, we can read this article here from Defense News. It says, after years of inattention, Congress scrambles to save defense supply chain. When Ukrainian fighters in May surrendered Mariupol's sprawling steel plant to Russian forces after a months-long siege, the consequences were widespread. Russia not only notched a victory over the 500 Ukrainians fighting to maintain control, but it also knocked out a plant central to Ukraine's position as a powerhouse in global neon gas exports. Those exports are key to manufacturing the very weapons the United States is sending to Kiev to defend against Moscow's invasion. Now let that sink in for a moment. The United States military has allowed itself to become reliant on this global supply chain, and that global supply chain is reliant on China, and it's reliant on this plant in Ukraine. So this neon gas is a key component in lasers used to fabricate microprocessors, which is also a key component we see in Taiwan, as we talk about what's been going on there in the news lately. And so we have this global supply chain, and the United States military has become dependent on it. I'm sure you've seen some of the stories about the United States is almost out of Stinger missiles. They supplied those to Ukraine, and they've used pretty much all of them, and the United States doesn't have any left, and we don't have the capacity, the capability to manufacture them right now. It's going to take years to be able to build that capability. And so we found the United States and the West in this predicament where they are sending armaments to Ukraine that are getting used, and they may not have the ability to replenish those if they need them to engage in a direct conflict themselves. And so this is a form, again, of siege warfare where the slow invasion of Ukraine, it may be hurting Russia, but it's also hurting the West as they pour resources into Ukraine day after day, week after week, month after month. Those are resources that will not be available if they need to use them firsthand. So we've seen these policies being enacted by Russia and China that are serving to weaken the West, serving to weaken the global economy. And I believe that Vladimir Putin has in his economic warfare arsenal his own economic weapon of mass destruction that he's probably going to deploy before all of this is over. What is that? Let's look at this post by financial advisor Luke Groman. He says Rickards, and here he's talking about Jim Rickards, who is the author of a book called Currency Wars, and he's written about a lot of these things for many years. It says Jim Rickards warned the Department of Defense how Russia could weaponize gold in 2009. Russia says, we now value gold at 1,000 barrels per ounce for Russian oil, physical gold only. The U.S. then faces a choice. Either the U.S. oil dies with oil at $1.80 per barrel, or gold goes to $100,000 an ounce, and we have a new currency system. So, one day, in all likelihood, Vladimir Putin is well aware of this post. This was, I'm sure, his line of thinking long before this was ever tweeted out, that Russia is the leading low-cost producer of oil in the world. They have the ability to simply come out and say, we will take physical gold as payment for oil at a below market price rate. And one of two things have to happen. Either the West gets sucked dry of physical gold, which ultimately would make the price explode because it would become so scarce, and you'd have this in this instance, this example, $100,000 an ounce gold. Right now it's around $1,800 an ounce is the stated price anyway. And what would that do to inflation? What signal would that send to the strength of the US dollar if the price of gold in US dollars went up 50-fold overnight? I would send a strong signal that the US dollar is weak and broken, and inflation would run rampant. Now, the United States could choose to say, well, we're going to suppress the price of gold, we're going to keep it right where it is. But if they do that, and Putin is trading 1,000 barrels, or whether it's 500 barrels of oil per ounce, whatever it may be, it drives the price of oil so low that the domestic U.S. oil industry collapses. They can't keep up. So ultimately, this is going to be a way that Vladimir Putin, whether it's 1,000 barrels an ounce or 500 or 200, with oil at about $100 a barrel on the world market right now, it would really only have to be more than 20 barrels, and the physical gold supply would start going away. And so what would that do to the US dollar and its reserve currency? It would destroy it. As Groman says here, he says, we have a new currency system. And I think that is the ultimate aim of Putin's invasion of Russia. So if we go to this post from Quoth the Raven from a couple of weeks ago, he says, Russia and China officially announce a new global reserve currency. If you've blinked over the last month, you may have missed it. China and Russia are taking their shot at the US dollar. And as often happens with consequential news in the United States and the West, no one seems to notice or even care. Since the beginning of the year, I've been writing about the possibility of Russia and China challenging the US dollar's global reserve status. Now it's happening. It shouldn't be any surprise to those paying attention that Russia and China are strengthening their economic ties amidst continued Western sanctions on Russia as a result of the country's war in Ukraine. What may surprise some people, however, is that Russia and the BRICS countries, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are officially working on their own new global reserve currency, as reported in late June. Nobody even seemed to notice. The issue of creating an international reserve currency based on a basket of currencies of our countries is being worked out, Vladimir Putin said at the BRICS Business Forum last month. And of course, as Russia has been cut off from the SWIFT system, it's also pairing with China and the BRIC nations to develop, quote, a reliable alternative mechanism for international payments in order to cut reliance on the Western financial system. So guys, this is what that's all about. It's all about countries that are creating real things, whether it's what China is manufacturing, whether it's the resources and raw materials Russia creates with its oil, with its metals and mining. They want to be paid in real things. They don't want to be paid in currencies that can be printed at will. They want to be paid with currencies that are backed by something. And so what they're doing here is they're talking about creating their own currency basket, but they want those currencies to be backed by the commodities that the nations themselves produce, which shifts the power away from the Western financial system and into the hands of these BRICS countries. And so we go on and we read, this alliance is growing. This article says Saudi Arabia among the countries set to join BRICS. 3 more countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey, are expected to join BRICS International Forum soon, with the possibility to discuss and decide on their membership bids at the BRICS Summit next year in South Africa. So if you remember, as Russia invaded Ukraine and the price of oil skyrocketed, Joe Biden made a call to the ruler of Saudi Arabia to ask for an increase in oil production. His call was not answered. That same day, we read articles about Vladimir Putin's call, and China's call to Saudi Arabia was answered. So there's this shift of Saudi Arabia, which has long been in the U.S. camp. You know, the term the petrodollar comes from the 1970s, when we made an offer to an agreement with Saudi Arabia that we would defend them. And you saw that in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We did that in the early 90s. We would protect them, defend them, if they sold their oil only in US dollars. That's beginning to change. Saudi Arabia is now accepting payment in different currencies, and now they're talking about joining this BRICS alliance, which would really hurt the US dollar and its standing as the world's reserve currency. We next read, Africa's largest natural gas exporter, Algeria, sparks interest in joining BRICS. It says Africa's largest natural gas exporter, Algeria, has said that BRICS interests them as an alternative to traditional power centers in the world. What are those traditional power centers? It's the West. It's London. It's New York. It's this financial system that creates currency out of thin air and financializes everything and doesn't value the real products that are being created by countries like Algeria that has the natural gas reserves. Remember, oil, agricultural products, precious metals, industrial metals, these things can't be printed. You can't print more barrels of oil, you can't print ounces of gold, but you can print dollars all day long. You can print euros all day long. So which one has the greater value? Ultimately, the greater value comes in the real things, not the paper products. It says, according to the Global Times, signals from Algeria that it wants to join BRICS demonstrate that more and more countries have faith in the group and its ability to offset the negative influence of certain countries' rising unilateralism and protectionism, said experts. So what is that unilateralism and protectionism? It's things like cutting you off from SWIFT, issuing sanctions if you get on the bad list. And countries don't want that. They want to have control over their financial destiny. And so this new alliance that's being created by Russia and China is appealing to those countries. And it says in addition to Iran and Argentina, which have officially applied to join BRICS, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt are also signaling. So more and more countries are coming into this Russia-China alliance, and they're opposing the West and this financial system. So ultimately, where does this head? Well, this does not erupt into a World War III as we think about in terms of all-out violent war with nuclear weapons that destroy the whole world. We know from the Bible that that does not happen. However, I believe it does lead to this form of economic and currency warfare, and in all likelihood that battle is going to go against the West, and it's going to empower Russia and weaken the United States, and we're going to see a powerful Russia entering the Ezekiel 38-39 war when we know that they will ultimately be destroyed by God, right? So at some point in the future, a true violent World War III will erupt. And when that happens, it will happen in a world where mutual assured destruction no longer rules the day. That doctrine is no longer an effective deterrent against that type of war. When that happens, advanced technologies will allow one nation or one coalition of nations to dominate the globe, take it over, and that's exactly what the Bible also teaches, that will happen. And when that happens, that global empire will be ruled by the Antichrist. So we're seeing all these events in the world news coming together piece by piece that are leading to that day. And we should be thankful and happy that that day will come, because at the end of that time, Jesus Christ is going to come back to this earth and he is going to rule as king. So keep your head up, keep smiling. I know the news can sometimes be depressing, but we have every reason to hope. If your faith is in Jesus, you have every reason to be hopeful and happy as we go through these trying times. So what do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to like and share this. And God willing, we'll talk again tomorrow. Thanks. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.